Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Gretchen Rubin, renowned happiness expert and best-selling author, to the Equal Planet podcast. Gretchen has inspired millions to find joy, mindfulness, and meaning in their everyday lives. She's here to bring insights to help us integrate personal well-being and collective action into our work as leaders in sustainability and equality. Too often, people like us who aim to do good end up burning out with how much we prioritize our movements over ourselves. In this episode, we'll explore how individual happiness can fuel advocacy for a fairer, greener world, how joy and justice are interconnected, and what practical habits can help all of us keep moving forward in the face of big challenges. Whether you're passionate about social change, the environment, or simply want to live a more vibrant life, Gretchen's wisdom will remind us that taking care of ourselves and our planet aren't separate journeys. They're part of the same path. Follow at Durga NYC to keep in touch and keep hearing about our upcoming actions, from volunteer days at soup kitchens to park cleanups to our Evening with Equal Planet on August 22nd. We'll see you there. Enjoy the show. Okay, hello there. My name is Durga Srinivasan, and I'm your host today for Equal Planet. Today, I'm so lucky to introduce Gretchen Rubin. She is a renowned speaker and author. And when I got to meet her, I had to ask the question, how can we apply so many of these ethos, these life philosophies that you write so eloquently about, to our most pressing movements? So thank you, Gretchen, for joining us. We're both in New York City today.
We are.
Not too far from each other. I guess a broader intro that we can start on is, where have you seen the world in terms of our movement towards climate action or social issues, especially in this day and age? And you are a very experienced individual, right? Like, I'm just graduating college. You've written many books. You've seen the world in many different phases. So what does the season bring for us?
I think that we're in a season of uncertainty. I think that there's just very, very deep uncertainty about what the future holds. What is the world going to look like in 5 years? What is the world going to look like next year? And I think that's very deeply unsettling for people. I remember during COVID that many people said, like, if I knew how long this would last, I'd be fine. I could pace myself. But it's just the uncertainty. And it's part of the human condition. We tend to really be very unnerved about uncertainty. We don't do well with change. And it feels like things are changing very fast and often in a negative direction. And it's just not clear what the future holds. And so I think that that's putting a lot of pressure on people. And I think, from my observation, younger people are experiencing this even more than older people, maybe because they have more decisions to make and sort of more waters to navigate. And if you don't understand, if you don't know where the islands in the stream are, you don't know how to navigate around them or toward them. Whereas for an older person, they're kind of on a path. And so they're like, well, I'm just going to deal what happens to me on my path.
Mhm.
To mix metaphors, but you got it.
No, 1000%. And it has a whole, a scene of the environment in our minds. That was beautiful. In this age of uncertainty, there is one thing that growing up in New York City, have been told since I was a child, which was my dad quoting you, saying that the days are long,
Uh,
the years are short.
mhm.
And I'm curious how this can apply to our global movements, because that's how what I was told as a New York City middle schooler, kindergartner, because things were always hectic. There was always something going on the subway. But now on a larger scale, how can we bring that methodology in, or that idea?
Well, that line, "the days are long, but the years are short," is really about the fact that there are two timelines, or that maybe we exist in multiple timelines at the same time. And that's sort of true in every area of our life. And the way that I thought of it is kind of like sometimes you wake up in the morning and you think, oh my gosh, so much has to get done by the time I crawl back into bed at night. It just feels interminable. It feels like I will never, just get through this day. And then you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, like I still am not used to writing 2025 on a check. How is it 2026? Or boy, what happened to being 27? I don't even remember anything. Or like, what happened to kindergarten? And so the days are long, but the years are short. But I think that that's true also with any kind of movement where, um, you might feel like, oh, it takes so long to make change, like especially like policy change or any kind of like, change on a significant scale takes so long. It can feel impossible. And then when you look back, though, you're like, well, that really was done. I mean, you talk about New York City. When I was growing up, the whole thing about New York City and also Los Angeles was like the incredible air pollution. It was just a running joke all the time that how terrible the air pollution was. It was just deeply ingrained in the identity of the cities. And I wasn't living in New York City then. I was really little. But even to me, like living in the Midwest, like that's what you knew about New York City. It had terrible, terrible, terrible air pollution. Nobody talks about that anymore.
Hmm.
Now there's all kinds of climate problems, but specifically the air quality in New York City is not something that is talked about. We talk about the rats far more than the air quality. Um, but that took decades of work and work and work that I'm sure to the people who were involved in it felt immensely frustrating and painfully slow. And yet in the end, it did have a result. And looking back, you're like, oh yeah, that was just like a blip. That was just like a period that New York City went through. And so I do think that sometimes if you feel very discouraged by how slow and how long things are, it can be helpful to say, well, but looking back, when we think, then it will compress.
Yeah.
It will seem shorter in hindsight than it seems like it is now.
I definitely want that to sit with people because so often in our movements, we find ourselves like bumping up against obstacles and often feeling burnt out or disillusioned. And I think what that can mean is like your specific line and like taking things slowly can help us realize that like we can control how we show up in the world and how we treat our days and treat one another. And that's how change happens like in the long term. And you can see track changes over years because of every day, every email sent, every letter signed, legislation you commented on. So I really like that framework.
Well,
uh,
there's a famous line from Ernest Hemingway, and I won't get it exactly right, but he said something like, "My bankruptcy," a character says like, "My bankruptcy happened very slowly and then all at once." And you see these things happening where it's like all of a sudden it's like something just changes and you think, oh, it's just like years and years and years of people like pushing and whittling and slowly public opinion is changing. And then it feels like, okay, this just happened overnight. But you're like, no, it's that it's slowly and then suddenly. And that's often the pattern that you see. And something that I might say, because you mentioned burnout, one thing that is might be relevant to your listeners is that often people will say to me something like, well, I worry that it's selfish for me to think of, because I write about happiness. It's selfish for me to think about my own happiness. If I'm concerned with my own individual happiness, that means I'm complacent. It means I'm smug. It means that I'm turning my back on everything that I see that's wrong in the world. And some people even feel like that in a world full of suffering and injustice, it's not morally appropriate to seek to be happier. But what the research shows, and I think if you think about the people in your own life, you'll see this borne out, that actually happier people are more interested in the problems of the world, and they're more interested in the problems of the people around them. They tend to vote more. They donate more money. They're more likely to donate their time. They're more likely to help out if a neighbor or a family member or a colleague or an organization needs a hand. They have healthier habits. They're less likely to have burnout or kind of like destructive patterns. Um, they're more tolerant. They have a better sense of perspective. And this makes sense because when we're happier, we have the emotional wherewithal to turn outward and to think about the problems of the world and the problems of other people. And when we're less happy, it's very easy to become defensive and isolated and preoccupied with our own problems because we're not happy. And so I think there's this idea that if people are happy, they're like, oh, I'm drinking margaritas by the beach. Whereas in fact, it's more like people are like, hey, don't you think that there's a better way to distribute malaria nets? Like, let's get on that, people, and to see a way to try to intervene. And so this idea that we can that in order to serve others, we have to take care of ourselves really is borne out by research. And so I always say to people, if it is selfish to want to be happier, we should be selfish, if only for selfless reasons, because this is really what is going to help us to play an important role in the world.
Oh, 1000%. And I remember this from your book, the book talk that you had, the discussion on the lower, I want to say it was Lower East or Lower West Side that I went to. And what you had talked about is also this idea of accepting yourself and
Hmm.
and still expecting more from yourself.
Exactly.
And I'm wondering, what are a few practical ways that you do this?
It's a very hard line to draw, and I think this is why self-knowledge is hard, and why nobody can hand you a template for like what will work for you, because each one of us has to decide for ourselves, like, how do I accept myself, show myself compassion, accept the natural limitations of my nature, and then where do I say, hey, I really can go outside my comfort zone. This really is something that I can ask of myself. And I think that it's something that you just really have to say, like, is this something where you're just like, hey, no, that's not for me? Or is it something where you really want to push into it? And I mean, these can be so funny, because a lot of times other people will be very earnestly arguing to you that you should absolutely do this and it will make you so happy or it would be so great for you. And you just have to say, not so much. Like, just to take a silly example, like meditation, because I write about happiness, people just assume that I'm really into meditation. And I have tried meditation, really, I've given it serious tries, like meditating for months. I went on a silent meditation retreat, and I'm just saying, like, it's not a tool that works for me. And I could say, I should do it more. I should do it different. I should try again. There's something wrong with me. I must be lazy. I must lack self-discipline. I must not have something that's important. And I should just keep pouring more and more energy into it, or feel guilty about the fact that I'm not doing it. Or I can say to myself, you know what? This isn't a tool for me. This isn't something that works for me. It works for a lot of people. I'm not saying it's not a valuable tool. I'm just saying, like, for me to achieve whatever aim I'm trying to achieve through meditation, maybe I need to try a different way, because I'm not seeing that this is resonating for me. So I'm accepting myself and saying, I'm going to let go of this. But there are other things where it's like, well, you know what? Maybe I can do this. Maybe I should stick to this. Maybe I do feel like this is right, even if it's making me feel anxious or frustrated or even angry that I can't do something or something's hard. Often when we're living in an atmosphere of growth, it's very uncomfortable. You know, it's hard to push ourselves. It's hard to do things that we're not good at, or that we feel that make us feel uneasy. But then we also get a tremendous feeling of growth from it. And that's a source of like energy that is extremely, extremely powerful and important for a happy life. So I wish that there was like an easy test or like an easy practice, but it really just depends on each individual person.
That's that's very fair. I think you're the first person who I've
Mm,
heard who has such a prolific voice in like the podcast, the wellness space, who actually says, you know what, this doesn't work for me, and it
mm,
might be great for other people. Go try it, but it's not for me. And I think
right,
that's so helpful, because that's how we can take things right going forward. It's not like if someone prescribes something, don't have to just take it at face value, examine it in your own context.
right,
Uh,
exactly.
and I want to jump and look at something you mentioned, which was growth. And you talk about choosing the bigger life.
Hmm.
What does that mean for you? And can you see that being applicable to the idea of, systems change, transformation on these global issues?
Well, it's very interesting because again, I study happiness. There's sort of two ways you can think about it. One is you focus on what I like to focus on, which is the individual. What can you do tomorrow within your own conscious thoughts and actions, within your temperament, your circumstances, your desires, your aims, your challenges, your weaknesses? What can you do to make your life happier, healthier, more productive, or more creative?
Mhm.
Another way to think about it is how can systems support people being happy, healthy, more productive, and more creative? What can organizations do? What can cities do? What can countries do? What can we do globally? Like, what are the things that we could do systematically? We could put in more green spaces in cities. We could have more public transportation. We could have a better climate. We could have mandatory book groups so that everybody was forced to be part of a group because research shows that people are happier when they have strong relationships, and so we're just going to force that down everybody's throat. That is the question of like, how do organizations and systems change?
Mhm.
And it's funny because there's a tension, because you could say, well, how can organizations change until people change?
Mhm.
And then you could also say, well, how can people change until organizations and institutions change? Both are true. Both are important. It happens that often people are very interested in one question or the other.
Mhm.
I happen to be very interested in like, what can you do starting tomorrow without having to have other people cooperate or participate or legislation to pass or whatever. But what you do see is that sometimes what will make you individually happier is to contribute to a larger change, is to say, I want to play a role in a massive movement. I want to write to a congressman every single day about something that matters to me. I want to register people to vote. I want to change my shopping and buying practices. I want to get a job where I'm directing investment into climate friendly projects, whatever it is. Like, so within your own life, you can make choices that would contribute to these larger systemic changes, or you can work directly on those systemic changes. It just happens that for me, I'm interested in the extremely individual thing. So that's how I always approach it. But it's definitely not the only way to approach it.
Oh, 1000%. I love that you're bringing that perspective. Like our listeners have heard these big ideas, but sometimes it takes coming down to who we are and how we show up in the world. And I love that framework again. And one thing you mentioned is the role of relationships in
Hmm.
movements, in just being a happy person.
Hmm.
So it was in your book, The Secrets of Adulthood, where you're talking about some of the best ways to be happy and how that often comes down to helping others.
Hmm.
Can we contextualize that, especially for, say, we have our college listeners where you have this wide swath of people going into the three main groups, which is like consulting, finance, which is kind of folks explicitly saying, like my friends and their whispers, like, I know this is not good for other people, but this is what I have to do. And I'm curious how we can interrogate that in the framework of helping others can actually make you happier in the long run. And it's not just monetary gain.
Well, one of the things that was really confusing to me when I first started studying happiness was this way, like, how do you think about other people and how do you think about yourself? Like, how do you frame that? And it took me a long time to work out this tension, because what I found is that two things are true. One of the best ways to make other people happy is to be happy yourself. One of the best ways to make other yourself happy is to make others happy. So, and that's one of the nicest things about human nature. One of the best ways to make yourself happy is to make other people happy. And so when you're working towards the happiness of others, that will make you happy as well. And in fact, this is so true that some people say, well, altruism is not possible. You cannot act truly altruistically, because anytime you do something that's altruistic, you feel good about it. And so in the end, it just ends up being like a self-satisfying thing. And I'm like, who cares? That's great. That's one of the nicest things about human nature. I think it's wonderful that people feel good when they do good in the world. I feel the best when it's me doing that good in the world. I'm like, let's lean into that. Let's not diminish that or dismiss it or say that it's fake. It's incredibly valuable. One of the best ways to make yourself happy is to make other people happy. But it's also true that one of the best ways to make other people happy is to be happy yourself, for the reasons that we were talking about before, that happier people are more likely to play a role in the problems of the world and the problems of other people. And also, even just on an individual level, and I think we all experience this, there's something called emotional contagion. We literally infect each other with our emotions. And so happier people will help make people happier. Now, you cannot make someone be happy. The only person we can change is ourselves. But we've all had that thing where we just are lifted by someone's good mood, or we're more likely we're dragged down by someone's bad mood. And so these things are passed back and forth all the time. You can pick up an emotion from somebody's voice on the phone. You can pick up an emotion from looking at the photograph of somebody. Like we are exchanging this all the time. And so it's really a mistake, I think, to focus on one or the other because it kind of will pull your life into a distorted field. If you're constantly saying, I don't matter, or like the way to make myself happy is to make other people happy, and that way I have to serve, 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 you could end up like really losing yourself in that. But if on the other hand, you're always saying like, well, one of the best ways to make other people happy is for me to be happy. And so like I just have to like, validate that, valorize that all the time. That would also not be a great life. You have to keep these things in balance. We all do. Yeah.
Most definitely. And especially in this field, like happiness can really never be a constant state, right? You see people getting hurt, people dying, people getting affected by climate issues. Can't be happy at that. But you also talk about this idea of bringing your own weather to the
Mhm.
picnic and how we actually have emotional responsibility even in hard situations. And I'm wondering how that can help us change how we, I guess, present ourselves. And we put on the news and I'll be watching and I'll see it and like I'll see people, getting hurt in LA, in India, and getting so upset, so angry, and so helpless, feeling so
Mhm.
hopeless. What is something we can tell ourselves or a strategy that can help us to just overcome that hurdle, that first immense wave of sadness?
Well, the first thing I would say was to think about how you're consuming the news. We all have a responsibility to be informed citizens, so that's really important. But I think it's much more valuable to read the news. And I actually get physical newspapers. I get 3 physical newspapers a day, plus I get magazines like The Economist or The Week and read news and for a variety of reasons. One is there's a limit to it where you're not just it's not just cable news that's on 24 hours or like a news feed that you can just scroll endlessly. It's not pumped up with music and splicing and videos that are going to arouse a lot of emotion. It's more information rich. It tends to be much more factually information rich, and it puts things in context because like I subscribe to Patch, which is like a hyper local news thing, and it's like my it's like my neighborhood where I live, and it's constantly like somebody's getting stabbed in the subway, and so like if I look at that, I might think people are getting stabbed in the subway constantly because it's like flashing that in my mind, and it's not putting it in a context of like how many millions of people ride the subway in New York City. It's a gigantic number of people. Are you safer? Am I safer in New Orleans or am I safer in New York City? I think I'm safer in New York City. You know what I mean? And so it's like it's pulled out of context and it's highly emotional. So I think reading it is good. And it comes to an end and you can sort of read it in a calm mind and take it in a calm mind instead of just like having it come at you and sort of like just bombarding you with images and not that it's not important to be moved by what's wrong with the world. Absolutely we should. But I do think that a lot of times like the if look the motto of news is if it bleeds, it leads. They know that that is a way to get people watching because if you really get them extremely emotionally inflamed. And so that's not always the best way. If what we want to do is to be informed and to be able to take thoughtful action, overwhelming ourselves, especially then if you become so overwhelmed or so swamped that you're like, I just have to disengage altogether, which can happen. Yeah, but I wanted to also say, like, sometimes because I study happiness, people think that what I'm arguing is that everybody should be 100% happy all the time. That's what we should be aiming for. And anything that gets in the way of that is bad, and we should steer away from it. 1,000%, I do not agree with that. Negative emotions have an extremely important role to play in a happy life. There are times when we want to feel sad or angry or ashamed or guilty or bored or resentful or just righteous indignation or whatever. Those are appropriate emotions. If we didn't have them, it's first of all, it's not realistic, and second of all, it wouldn't be a good life. Those are really important emotions because that's what gets us to take action to bring about change. And so a happy life isn't a life where everything that causes negative emotion has been eliminated. It's more like how do you learn from the negative emotion and how do you allow it to take your life in a better direction? Because if you're like oh my gosh, I'm so angry. I'm so frustrated. I have so much righteous indignation when I see all these mistakes that are being made in climate policy. It's like, given that you know that from information that you know, then what do you do with that information? Whereas if you're overwhelmed with bad feelings, you might say, I can't take it. Or you might just stay hypnotized by watching and feeding and maybe even thinking like that counts, that somehow like if I'm getting incredibly worked up, that somehow I'm making change in the world, which we are not. Like merely allowing ourselves to like feel things intensely, like that has to be channeled into action, we hope, if that is going to bring about change. And so you have to think about, well, how do I manage myself? I remember somebody saying like, I was so upset about the election that I started smoking again. And it's like, I get it, but now you've really done something damaging to your health. Maybe you should have thought about like, how can I get through this tough time in a way that will also allow me to manage my own self. So I think you want to say to yourself, like, am I getting from this what I want, or am I getting things that like aspects of this that are not good for me and that aren't actually doing anything helpful for me? There's nothing to be gained from all of this, but there's maybe something that there's a cost to it. And here's a drive-by hack if you want a quick hack. If you feel yourself enraptured by your phone and you can't turn away, make it grayscale. Turn it to black, white, and gray. That's very easy to do in your settings. And believe me, you will find it far easier to put your phone down, because it's a lot harder to use and it's a lot less interesting to look at. And then you're just like, if it's important, I'll read it in black, white, and gray, or watch it in black, white, and gray. And if I can't be bothered, then maybe it doesn't matter that much to me.
No, I found myself finding like I don't really want to just scroll and look at black and white photos of my friends. I don't need to do that. But I do get made fun of for it. So I will disclose that for the
Oh, that's good. I love it. I love it. So you do that all the time?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Good, good, good. Excellent practice.
It was definitely worth it. I know Gretchen has to get to puppy duty and then another interview and all the things. So we're going to wrap it up. But stay tuned to hear more. And I hope this gave everyone a different point of view on how we can move forward, not just through action, but really investigating our internal habits and how we can continue this movement by being our best selves. Thank you so much, Gretchen.
Thank you. It was great to talk to you.
Okay, signing off. Thanks. I'm deeply grateful to everyone who made this podcast possible, including all of you for being here. Special thanks to Devin Henry and my family, Sri Srinivasan, Rupani Krishna Srinivasan, and Adejuan Ojibobo. Two people who made truly invaluable contributions to the creation of this podcast from our professors, Allison Jones and Diane Weddington. I also learned invaluable audio skills from workshops at Duke's DeWitt Wallace Center, led by Professors Barry Yeoman and Stephen Buckley, and NPR's Emily Fang. Thank you all for your wisdom and support. If you'd like to join our team or send in suggestions, fill out the form in the show notes or reach out to dms137@duke.edu. Thank you.